intrusive and unwanted thoughts and feelings, tics, behaviors, compulsions, habitual practices that only make sense to the person doing them, repetitive checking, repetitive touching, repetitive cleaning, washing, counting, redoing, looping and looping and looping and looping. What is OCD? Well, other than everything you just witnessed then, let me take you into a bit more depth because there is a lot more where that came from. And I'm not talking about the OCD where you see your friend on Instagram post a picture saying hashtag OCD because they've got their shoe collection in a nice, neat order. I'm sure you've heard the term being thrown around kind of like a figure of speech. And as much as this may reflect OCD, it does not display probably 99% of the bigger picture. You know, there are some that may even use the term unintentionally or quite lightheartedly. For example, I'm so OCD because I like my cupboard nice and neat is kind of like saying I'm so anorexia because I'm eating a salad.
What the hell are you talking about?
You know, it doesn't make sense, and I'm sure you could easily see how bizarre that may seem, and especially to those who are actually suffering with this condition. The aim of this video is to explain what OCD actually is, going by the clinical diagnosis of it. Now, this is also to provide the knowledge and understanding so that people actually suffering with OCD can feel easier to put their hand up and say, I'm actually suffering. Also, hopefully we can remove it as a stereotype in society so that it makes it a lot easier for people to come out, because every time it's used as a stereotype, it can either annoy people or it can put them back in their shell because they don't want to admit to something that they think is quite weird, that other people seem like they're dealing with it so easily, yet inside the sufferer, they've got some internal turmoil just burning down the house. So for those of you who are suffering, now this is a way to gain some more knowledge and understanding, not only for yourself, but to hopefully explain to others. This is crucial in the fact that the more you understand what you have, the more capability you've got to explaining it to others and gaining some relief so that others actually know you have it. Because what tends to happen with people suffering with OCD is they have a tendency to avoid certain situations, circumstances, places, people, and array of things, which is in my definition not freedom at all. Now, these places, circumstances, and things may trigger off certain characteristics of their OCD. This is why they want to avoid it. And for those of you who aren't suffering with OCD, I really hope that you can gain some more knowledge so that you have a fuller understanding of what OCD is, and so that you possibly have more compassion to those who are suffering. OCD stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder and is a psychological disorder. I'm going to reference the DSM-5, which is a very well-renowned book that clinical psychologists and therapists use to diagnose mental diseases and disorders. Just so there's no confusion, I'd like to take the definition out of the book of mental disorder and OCD. According to the DSM-5, the definition of mental disorder, a clinically significant behavioral or psychological syndrome or pattern that occurs in an individual, is associated with present distress or disability, or with a significantly increased risk of suffering, death, pain, disability, or an important loss of freedom. Must not be merely an expectable or culturally sanctioned response to a particular event, for example, the death of a loved one. A manifestation of a behavioral, psychological, or biological dysfunction in the individual. So that's mental disorder. Now on to OCD. According to the DSM-5, it describes OCD as the presence of obsessions, compulsions, or both. So obsessions are defined as recurrent, persistent, disturbing, or intrusive thoughts, urges, or impulses. Now, compulsions are defined as repetitive behaviors or mental acts that the individual feels driven to perform in response to an obsession. So essentially, these behaviors and mental acts are a way of alleviating the distress and anxiety of the sufferer, and hopefully neutralizing the possible outcome of a dreaded event taking place. However, this may sometimes not even correlate and may not make sense in a realistic way. Let's get this straight though. A psychological disorder is an extreme version of behaviors or beliefs that most people might actually experience every now and again. So it is very likely that you've experienced symptoms of OCD, however, you're not going to be clinically diagnosed to having OCD. Actual OCD specialists define as when the symptoms start affecting their ability to function in everyday life. This is just one very minute characteristic of my OCD. At times it feels like I have to walk through a doorway in a very particular way. Otherwise, I get the feeling of anxiety that just doesn't leave. It drives me crazy. It just doesn't make sense. And or are extremely distressing. Sometimes the feelings become that overwhelming that I just have to stop and deal with it. I can't actually carry on with the day. Otherwise, it feels like my head is going to implode. And or when the sufferer is in danger to themselves. An example of when I used to feel like I was kind of in danger was when at the last minute of me entering the bowl at a skate park, I had the urge that I had to do the backflip. But when you don't prepare, the level of risk is significantly higher when you're leaving the bowl. And let me tell you, I've come quite close to collecting myself and even falling back into the bowl. But luckily I haven't. Other times I've even been driving and I have the urge that I can't steer the steering wheel until I count in a very particular way to 5. So sometimes OCD may correlate from behavior to compulsion. For example, someone that has a fear of contamination and they go to shake someone's hand, they may feel the urge to have to go wash their hands over and over and over. Now, other times it may make no sense whatsoever. For example, if the sufferer has the urge to count to 5 before closing the fridge door or going from one room to another, otherwise they're going to crash their car tomorrow, you can see how that kind of doesn't make sense. Either way, in the sufferer's mind, the threat is very, very real. The chemistry that's going on in the brain is convincing them that this event is going to take place unless they do the compulsion. Unfortunately, this is where the OCD gets solidified and it is made stronger. As the thought, feeling, or impulse arises, which seems very real to the sufferer, they get an overwhelming sense of anxiety and distress. Now, the sufferer will want to get rid of that feeling and thought as soon as possible, so they are compelled to do the compulsion in order to alleviate the distress. As soon as the compulsion is performed, then they get a sense of relief. Unfortunately, it's very, very temporary. I'm going to explain this phenomenon in another video that's called The Science of OCD. So for the person that's suffering with OCD, the cost of doing the compulsion, completing it, may seem very simple, especially if it's going to outweigh the probability of the cost of possibly crashing their car or an unfortunate event taking place. However, when this fear starts intruding every single day, every single hour, every single minute, and they are compelled to follow it up with the compulsion, I'm sure you can see how this is going to cost not only their time, their energy, their focus, their attention, and even confidence. It can sometimes feel a very far away place from presence, something that we all chase to get focused, to get productive, to have more energy. We want to be present with loved ones, family, and even just work itself to be more significant, more successful. It can feel like a real tug of war between presence and OCD. I hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. I hope it gave you some good information and advice that you can take with you. Now, my aim is to raise as much awareness about OCD that people that are suffering can feel free to speak up and admit that they have something going on. Now, this is going to be the first step into the healing process. All the time, energy, focus, and attention that can be taken from a person that is suffering with OCD can be not only detrimental to them, but even those around them. It can just be debilitating. I wish to free as many minds as possible so that the people that are suffering and the world can rejoice and we can be more connected as a whole. Thank you so much for watching. It honestly means so much to me that you're even watching up to this point. If you'd like to follow along, please feel free to subscribe to the OCD Unlocked YouTube channel, follow and like the Facebook page, and even follow along the Instagram page. And I'll be posting up as much content, advice, and information as I can on a weekly and hopefully on a daily basis. So thank you so much again. It means the world to me. I'll see you in the next video.